Hi, everybody. We're back again and we're talking about field research this week. I know you guys are probably sick of talking about research and hearing me talk about it. Um, just to let you all know, you only have this one research class, and I was talking to people from psychology, uh, and they have a research methods class like this one. They also have a whole class on experimental design, which was just 1 week of this class, and then they were required to take another class on statistics, which is relating to a lot of the SPSS assignments that you all are doing. So, as much as you all hate this class, I'm sure, and I hear about it all the time, you don't have it nearly as bad as the psychology students. I thought I would just mention that. Even though I don't consider it to be bad because I like this stuff. That's obviously why I teach it. But anyway, for those of you that aren't liking it, I thought I'd put it in perspective a little bit that you guys have the easy way out, so to speak, by being criminal justice majors. Anyway, so we're talking about field research this week. And just to introduce this a little bit, field research is a lot like just going and kind of watching what happens. You can kind of make unobtrusive observations. I've always wanted to go to bars and watch and see how much people get drunk and whether they drive or not, and then do some sort of data analysis on that to see if there's any kind of difference between the people that go to the bar and drink and then drive versus the people that call Ubers or ride with a DD or something like that. And so that's just an example of how you might do that. Maybe you might hypothesize that people that have more money can afford an Uber, and the people that don't have as much money, they take the risk and drive. I don't know. Anyway, so you can do it through your direct observations. You can actually ask questions during these things too. So this is an interesting thing, and I really like it. You could look at maybe street level drug dealers to distinguish the dealers from the customers. You want to be careful with that because you don't want them to think that you're a police officer watching them. So that's another interesting thing to make sure that they don't think you're a cop. Because they might not like that very much, and that could lead to problems for you. Anyway, um, but this also allows you to kind of create a better understanding of what's going on by observing how people behave in their natural setting. You're not bringing them into a lab and doing an experiment. You're not bringing them into my office and talking to them in the office, or maybe even, excuse me, in a classroom or anything. You're seeing them out on the street or wherever it is that they are doing whatever they do, so they're going to behave probably more normal, especially if they don't know they're being watched, right? Um, so there's some different types of roles of being an observer, so to speak. You can be a participant, actually, where you participate, and your true identity and purposes are known to the subjects. So maybe you're doing research. I'm trying to think of a research type that you could go and participate in. We heard of the unethical behavior of one researcher who was a complete participant, who was being the lookout while the people were having sex uh, in the bathhouses. Remember when we were talking about ethics? So you want to be careful, and most of the time you don't really want to be a complete participant. If you want to go and observe people using drugs or committing crimes, just because you're doing research doesn't mean that you're absolved from the legality of doing these things, and you could very well be arrested. Even if you're a participant as an observer, if you're a participant as an observer and you're people are going to rob a bank and you're in the car just watching, and you're going to be considered to be an accomplice, right? Uh, you could be an observer as a participant, which means you make known your position as a researcher, but you don't actually participate in anything. You're just kind of sitting there watching, but they know that you're a researcher. Now, I think that the best way would be, to be a complete observer. So you observe without becoming a participant, and they don't know that you're observing them, because then they might change their behavior if they know they're being watched. Whoever you're watching to see what's going on, the Hawthorne effect and reactivity that we talked about before. Um, so, purposive sampling in field research is, an interesting thing that's actually rarely used, but probability sampling is actually rarely used. Sorry, but purposive sampling is quite common. Probability sampling is really hard to do with field research because you can't say, okay, well, I want to watch every third person, and it gets a little tricky pretty quickly. But with purposive sampling, it's a little bit easier. And I won't go into all of the details of purposive sampling because you guys have already read all of that and we've already covered it. Recording observations. This is often, we talked about that with interviews, but with observations, this is quite plausible too. And one thing you want to do too, if you do take notes, oftentimes, you don't want to be seen as that person that's over there with a camera, taking notes, especially if you're trying to make them not know that you're watching them. But if you do take notes, you need to do it immediately after the observations. Don't wait until the next week or the next day and stuff like that because your memory is going to be a little bit, different, and you might not remember everything. These can be, and the videotapes and photographs can make records of before and after things happen. So keep these things in mind. Linking field observations and other data. So it's useful to combine field research with surveys or data from official reports, and this can lead to what's called convergent validity. So you have maybe the field research and then the data from the official reports, and they all tell you the same thing. So, for example, the Baltimore study the effects of neighborhood physical characteristics on residents' perceptions of crime, and they actually, looked at the physical characteristics, and what they got official data from, and then the survey's perceptions of crime, and then so their perceptions was measured with surveys, and then the physical problems, within the neighborhood characteristics, they used census data, crime reports, and stuff like that, and put it all together. Um, so shoplifting, think about it. It's counted only when the offense is seen, but it takes place only in certain locations, right? Crime of stealth and not confrontation, right? So it's not like, we know every time, even the victim knows every time it's happened. They might find out later when they do inventory, but that's more challenging. So subjects are, can engage in this behavior, and we don't know it. Nowadays, there's cameras everywhere, so it's much more easy to pick out than it used to be. But anyway, how many people wear seatbelts? Well, look at the rate of use and the number of people wearing them, number of cars, stationary observers at roadsides rather than mobile. Place them at controlled intersections. You could sample cars on 3 dimensions, time of day, and all this other stuff. Um, I remember when I was in graduate school, there was always these people watching this intersection with the crosswalk, and they were doing observations of how many people actually waited for the crosswalk to, the green person to come on to say to walk, and how many people would jaywalk across it. They're also analyzing how many people were texting while they were crossing the street and not paying attention to the traffic and stuff. And this went on for probably a year or so. And come to find out, somebody in psychology had gotten a grant to do this kind of observational research. And the people who were graduate students and over there with clipboards and, writing down the people and who did and what they did, when they came across. And then they, took it back and put it all into a big data set. So bars and violence is another example. Alcohol, has this interesting effect when it comes to aggression and violence, right? And so researchers might set to learn how situational factors promote or inhibit violence in nightclubs and bars and things like that. Uh, you know, that might be another study to think about, right? So there's some strengths and weaknesses to this as well. It provides a great depth of understanding. There's some flexibility there. You don't really have to prepare that much in advance. You just go out and watch what happens, right? More appropriate for to measure behavior than surveys, right? One of the things you might think about too is it has pretty high validity, right? Quantitative measures, you kind of paint this incomplete picture because we're just trying to measure things with numbers. But when you're there watching things, you're seeing the whole shebang, right? Everything that happens. You know, even though we talk about eyewitness testimony being kind of pretty low when it comes to criminal trials and things, and especially with the people being uh, falsely convicted, right? That's the number one predictor of a false conviction is a reliance on eyewitness testimony. Anyway, but there's often this kind of low reliability. It's because it's so subjective. What one researcher sees and perceives one way, another researcher might see a different way, which is another one of the big kind of weaknesses of this, as well as generalizability. It's hard to, because of the low reliability and the sampling, it's really hard to kind of generalize what you saw at that one intersection with the people jaywalking to every intersection in that city or every intersection in the whole country. So it's more difficult to be able to kind of draw conclusions about a whole population about these things. But anyway, so that was about all I had to say about field research. So those of you, please make sure that you read your chapters and don't forget to do your discussion boards. And I believe you have an SPSS assignment this week too. So don't forget to do that. And please be thinking about your research projects that you have for this class, and don't wait until the last minute to do that either. All right, and I will talk to you next time for Module 13. All right, bye.